So we're continuing our series on fighters with Bummy records. And right now I want to draw to your attention Soldier Jones. Now there's a lot of things I want to say, but usually you have to look at different eras. Again, the question remains, why did Soldier Jones get a shot at some of the best fighters of his era in his weight classes, right? Now, Soldier Jones, just for your information, though it says that he spent most of his time at heavyweight, he actually began his career at light heavyweight, okay? What we're going to do, because you already saw his record there, he had more losses than wins, so his record was quite bummy. But you got to understand who this guy fought, okay? And I think this is very important for you to understand who he fought. So, as you go through his resume here, you will notice something. First thing that got my attention about this particular fighter is that he fought less guys with resumes, that is records, with more losses than wins. So he was matched tough quite early in his career, and that's because of the times he was in. We're looking at the times in 1915 all the way up to 1930s, okay? So in those times, people were matched with whatever was available, basically. How a prospect is looked at today, prospects have fewer fights than guys back then because they fought so regularly. So a guy who was still kind of green was a guy who had 20 and 30 fights compared to today where we'd have like 10 to 12 fights, okay? Because the guys fought so very often. So a guy who had 20, 25, even 30 fights could still be looked at as green, learning on the job. But past 30 fights, you're looking at somebody who's now a guy who may have gotten seasoned into boxing, okay? This is one way of looking at it because guys could fight 25 times for 1 year. Sometimes they could fight 30 times for 1 year. And that's just 1 year of fighting. You know what I mean? So when you think about it, these guys progressed much faster back then to some degree. They developed much faster because they had so many more fights. Now, it's not really true because even in this age, guys develop through sparring so that they're preserved much more and their records are preserved much more. And sparring is used for many different purposes, but part of it is to teach the boxers the craft. So sparring from those times till now has kind of evolved a lot more, and it is used to serve for a fighter to learn different styles and to emulate different styles and to also deal with high level competition, high level opposition, because when you spar a champion and you're able to hang with him, in almost an all-out sparring session, sometimes an all-out war, you go against the champion because you want to show that you're as good as he is, or can hang with him, or can be better than him, or can hit him and damage him. These things happen in sparring now. But of course, sparring is not the actual fights, okay? But I just digressed for a minute because I want to go into this guy's record. And what you will notice in this guy's record, he hardly fights anyone with more losses than wins. So this guy's been matched tough throughout his career. Of course, there were people who, had much less fights than he had. And some he beat and some beat him, Now, here's the other interesting thing about this gentleman, Soldier Jones. He's born John Horace Bowden. What's very interesting about him is the notable names that he fought. In I think it is his 10th fight, he fought Harry Kreb. Okay, Harry Kreb. Harry Kreb is a Hall of Famer, an ATG, and he fought him at light heavyweight. And he didn't fight him but once, but he fought him, I believe, 3 times. He fought him again in 1921. He fought Kreb again in 1923. So I think he fought him 3 times. So that in itself is quite amazing. But he fought Harry Kreb early in his career. He also fought another notable fighter in, I mean, there were a number of notable fighters here, but he also fought Gene Tunney, who was at the time lightweight champion of the, not lightweight champion of the world. I don't think he was the lightweight champion of the world at the time, but he was a top lightweight. He then became lightweight champion of the world. He also fought Tommy Gibbons. Okay, immediately after. Remember, this guy is losing all his fights, right? Why are these guys fighting him? And he also fought a number of other notable names. Tom Renault was known as a relatively good fighter. Okay. He also fought a couple of other guys here. George Godfrey, who was a humongously big, huge heavyweight. George Godfrey. He fought him at heavyweight, actually, when he fought him. Now, why am I talking about these things? Because this guy's continuously losing. You can see how much times he's losing. But yet he gets these big fights with these great opponents. And I didn't take time to actually show you his record when he fought them. But you can just see he's lost so many different fights. And his wins are few and far between, okay, in his career. Now, the question is why? Why did this guy, Soldier Jones, get these fights? And you have to remember, while he was KO'd by a number of guys, and still, after being KO'd, he might take on another big opponent to fight, the immediate fight after. But there are a number of factors you have to consider. Now, I'm asking you the question still because I want you to think about these things, right? And there's a reason why I'm going through fighters with Bummy records right now. In different eras. There's a reason why I'm doing this. But what I'm trying to show you is this. These fighters were fought, by some of the great names. Now, there are two things you must note about these times. In the times of these early eras, everybody generally just fought everybody. It was like a run-of-the-mill. I might fight you 4, 5, 6 times, okay? Everybody fought everyone. It's not so today. Everyone doesn't fight everyone. All right, we go up in levels, we go up in ranks, and then the higher echelon will try to fight all of the higher echelon. But back then, there wasn't really a caste system per se. All right, there wasn't this great ranking system per se, and it wasn't just the division between colored and white fighters. And a lot of people say there were a lot of fighters and it was a great pool of fighters. Well, it wasn't really that. It was that boxing wasn't organized as well as it is today. So what you have now is levels in boxing because there's quite a huge supply of boxers in the world and a lot of people in boxing. It's just that everybody doesn't fight everyone. You get what I'm saying? People have to climb ladders and get to certain levels before they fight each other. And guys at the same level fight each other. Back then, it didn't matter what level you were. You could start off as a debutant and fight a guy with 100 and something fights. You know what I mean? Under his belt. So it was a little bit different. It was like learning on the job. While there was something called sparring back then, it wasn't as elaborate as it is today. Okay? So it was different times. So this is one of the reasons I can give you immediately why Soldier Jones was able to fight these top level opponents, right? And these guys, they fought out. The thing about back then was the guys fought out everybody, or they fought out all the top level opposition. So they ran out of opposition. So they had to start fighting new fresh meat, as they say, or fresh blood. So guys like Soldier Jones, they would get their shot at fighting these top tier guys. And they wouldn't get championship fights, but they would get to fight the top tier guys. So you have to understand it was different times. Now, other than that, there's some other factors I want to put into play. And I'm going to just add in one more factor. If, say, for instance, Boxer X beat this guy very well, I would want to outdo Boxer X. So I would go fight the same guy and beat him even better to show that I'm actually could do it with my style better than he could do it with his style. Remember, boxing's all about styles, right? And even back then, there were different styles to fighting. Now, so this is another reason, and I already provided those reasons in the videos before. The last reason I will give you has to do with a fighter being given the opportunity. Back then, the opportunity to fight someone was only limited, especially at the highest level, at championship level, it was only limited by color of skin back then. You know, Joe Gans was able to break through that barrier and be the first guy to win, the first black person at least, to win a world title. He won the lightweight title. Okay, he became the world lightweight champion of the world. But you have to understand that, barring race and color, generally speaking, you know, anybody could fight, you know, the guy who was at the top. You know, it was kind of like that back then. It was kind of like all systems go. So because of those things, I think that's another reason why Soldier Jones was able to fight these top tier guys. All right. So those are my reasons, but there are more. So I would like to hear your input into this. Why would a guy with such a bummy record and who was losing fights so much during that period of time, why would he be able to fight these top tier champions and be knocked out by them and so on? Why do you think this guy was able to get those shots ahead of other guys? All right, you guys have a great one.